Hi everyone, getting a sense of spring being around the corner today. It's early August and we've got a run of some sunny days coming up, which is the weather I enjoy after a long cold wet winter. Outside the laundry today is another sunny spot. You often find the cats sunbaking out here, but I wanted to talk a bit more about the trip to India, 1990. I don't know if you saw the first episode, if you got through it, if you found it of any interest. We left off where I had reached down the bottom of the west coast of India, Trivandrum. I sold the bicycle and prepared to fly to Sri Lanka, but before we do that, there's two other memories of that bike ride that came to me. One of them was one of these things called a thali. It was down the south of India, maybe Kerala, stopped for something to eat where there were these long trestle tables, and this Indian kid had this belt with bowls of curry attached to the belt, and he had a wooden ladle, and you sat at this long trestle table. You weren't there to talk and to socialise, you were there to eat grub. It was all vegetarian food, and he'd slop the curries onto your plate. They were always coming up and topping up with the rice. There were these aluminium mugs of water on the trestle table, so I had that memory, and also lots of sawdust on the floor. It was messy eating, but fantastic vegetarian Indian food. The other memory I had was one night I stopped at this place, and I booked into a hotel. I sat down, it was getting dusk, and I was eating, talking to the locals, and I was getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. I don't think I had any spray with me or something, so I retired up to the room, and they had these things called brownouts where the power's on half speed. So the only protection from the mosquitoes I had was this fan above the bed, but it was spinning so slowly with this brownout that it was doing nothing. So I tried sleeping under the sheets, but it was too hot for that, and the mosquitoes were driving me mad. So I got up it was about 1 a.m. and I got on the bike and I left, and I rode through this area where there were all these lakes. I could make out mountains and lakes. I was so thirsty, and I rode over these long bridges. What I could make out by moonlight was a series of lakes, until I was so thirsty, and I kept thinking of coming around the corner and finding a 7-Eleven or something and getting myself a cold drink. And then out of the distance, like a mirage, was these lights. I mean, it was the middle of the night. It was about 3 a.m. by now, and there were indeed lights flickering, and this guy had a little stall, but he wasn't selling Coke or something, a nice cold drink. He was selling coconut juice. So I sat down and drank a couple of these coconuts with the straw in them. They weren't very refreshing, to be honest, but yeah, amazing how that came to reality from my imagination. Anyway, yeah, as I said, I flew to Sri Lanka mainly because I had people that I worked with that were Sri Lankans. I knew a little bit more about that place. They were a lot more westernised. They spoke good English, a bit more orderly, not as chaotic and crowded. So I actually hired a motorbike in Sri Lanka. I went to Kandy, I saw the Buddha's tooth, I went to like elephant sanctuaries. I went down along the coastline, Gaul, and I did go to a place called Nurelia, I think it was called, and it was an attempt to get cool. I'd been hot for so long that if you went and stayed at this place, it looked a little bit like the hotel from Fawlty Towers. It was right up in the highlands of Sri Lanka, in the middle of the island. I rode the motorbike there, but when you got there, you needed to sleep under a blanket. That's how appealing that sounded after months of sleeping in hot weather. But while I was there, I went to a place called World's End. So you walked along this track and then you got to this steep cliff, and all in front of you was cloud and mist, and it was like you were at the edge of the world. So I remember that. I had a reasonable time in Sri Lanka, probably a couple of weeks, and then I flew across to Madras. I was looking forward to that because all my mail, I'd given the address of, in those days, Post Restante. If you went to a post office, you could collect mail there if you were a traveller. So I had guided my family and friends to write to me at Madras post office, Post Restante. So I was really looking forward to getting to some mail. It had been months since I'd heard from anyone, and you know, my dad had written me a letter there. I was really excited about. I don't really remember much about Madras. Here comes a cat. Here comes Chloe. Hello. She loves it out here. Come on. So yeah, I got the train from Madras, and I'm sorry for using the old names, but these are the names I knew when I was there, to Kolkata, and that was a hell of a ride. That took a long time. I don't remember exactly how many hours. One incident on the train, you could sort of book kind of like bunks. You know, there was the area down the bottom where you sat with everyone else, and then there were like flat bunks a bit higher up that you could lay down to pass the time on this hell of a train trip, which was packed. But I was sitting down on this occasion. I noticed a lot of the locals were staring at me. This is where the noddy shorts come in. So I was reading my book and had my legs spread open, the noddy shorts on, which, as I said, were big and baggy and blue. And eventually, out of curiosity, they couldn't help themselves. One of the men came up and said, "Please do not be so frank." I said, "What do you mean? I'm not frank." No, you're being frank. Please, no frankness." So I realised that they were looking up my shorts, that I hadn't tucked myself away very well in the noddy shorts. Anyway, eventually I got to Kolkata, and that was the best place ever. I was always looking forward to Calcutta because it was the biggest city, it was the craziest, it was the most chaotic, and I liked the idea of that. So yeah, same sort of deal. Got off at the train station, wandered around, found some lodge to stay at, walked up these steep steps to this waiting room where there was like a half a dozen cot beds laid out, and there was a desk in the corner where this Sikh fella was sitting doing the books, you know. So he says, you know, are you after a bed? I said, yeah. He says, I'd have to you know, get you another bunk bed. Is that all right? I said, yeah, that'd be fine. So he went down. He had a guy working for him, like a Hindu guy, because the Sikhs feel, I think, are a higher caste than the others. So he sent this little fella down to the basement to get a bunk bed. Comes back up the stairs and he assembles it for me. Put my backpack down, sit on the bed. It's all good. I'm just laying there reading the book when I hear this noise of laughing and yelling, and then I hear the heavy sound of boots coming up the steps, and it sounds like the British Army are invading. And sure enough, the door flings open into our communal area, and in come these British guys. They were like hooligans, like football louts. About, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them. And they looked around, and one of them said, "Oh, hi, how you going?" I said, "Yeah, good." He says, "Where you from?" I said, "Australia." He goes, "Oh, hi, Aussie." So they went into this room, this separate room, right, that had the doors, 2 double doors. They went in there and they closed the doors behind them. And if they were noisy coming up the stairs, they were even noisier when they were in their room. That must have been the only sort of private room in this accommodation. The rest was like dormitory style, okay? The Sikh was looking very unhappy with them, like he was seething. Yeah, and they were getting real loud, giggling, laughing, cracking jokes, and then the door opened a little bit, and one of them, the one that had greeted me, said, "Hey Aussie, do you want to come in?" So I went in, and they had a bong going, but it wasn't just a bong, it was like a bucket bong. I'd never had a bucket bong in my life, right? And I've been smoking weed for many years prior to that. Anyway, it became apparent that the one that had invited me in was their leader. To this day, he was a hell of a good-looking guy. He looked a bit like, I'm going to say Krishna. He had his hair in one of those ponies at the back. Not a complete pony, but just a part pony at the back of his head. He was a real good-looking guy, and he was charismatic. He was their leader. He was real charismatic. They seemed to listen to him, and he was the one cracking the jokes. And so anyway, they were making a mix with hash. You know, they had this big block of hash like that. So I said, "Do you reckon I could get some of that?" He goes, "Oh, we'll get some for you." So they swing this window open down onto the street, and they were like those old-fashioned slate windows, wood, you know. They fling that open, and they yell down onto the street for this kid. And I was watching this, and this kid yelled up and he said, "Oh yeah, what do you?" And they said something like, "Can you grab Babu?" Something like that. And this old man comes over. You know, and of course the street's the same as I've already described. There's every kind of activity going on. I'm talking about early afternoon, right? So the old man comes wandering over, and he looks up, and they said, "Oh, can you get some?" They got opium, they got hash, and they asked me, did I want anything else, and I don't know, but that was more than enough, right? So, you know, 10 minutes later, the kid comes up the stairs, and he knocks on the door. He comes in, and he brings this stuff for them, and I was going to give them money to cover this stuff, and they said, "Don't worry about it, it's real cheap, you know, don't worry about it, take it." So they threw me this opium and hash, right? So that afternoon, and the next hour or two was smoking bucket bongs with hash, and then mixing it with opium. The opium was this sticky brown stuff, and they were hilarious. As I said, the guy who seemed to be their leader, he was just a vivant. You know, he was enigmatic, memorable. I've never forgotten him. And in fact, I bought this chillum, which was like a clay pipe, which had an image of Krishna on the pipe, and it looked a little bit like that guy with that bun at the back, which is partially why I bought it. So you could say I had the hots for him, yeah, I'll say that. But he was just he had so many stories of London, and you know, he used that Cockney slang, and he's very cool. So he says to me, he says, "Tomorrow we're going to the planetarium, you should come along with us." So I go, "Yeah, that'd be good." So next day in the morning, we all get back into the room again, and we're smoking these bucket bongs, and we're getting totally, you know, completely toasted. And so we go down these steps back to the madness of the street, and you step out of that lodge onto the street, and it's like poof in your face, you know, the heat, the noise, the activity, and of course we're all red-eyed and giggling and tickling each other. And so we get these tuk-tuks to, it was like the Albert Museum. That was the one place I enjoyed seeing, was the Victorian Albert Museum, big white structure in Kolkata. And but the planetarium was there. It might have been a weekend, because there are a lot of Indians there. The women were in sari, the men were in, you know, smart slacks and sports shirts. And here we are, a bunch of hooligans and louts, cracking up laughing and all that. And in the planetarium, which was quite primitive, the fellow showing the You know, you were looking up at the dome to see the planets and the explanation, and the Indian that was doing the presentation was pronouncing Venus, which sounded like penis, and of course that sent us into squeals of laughter and the looks of disgust from the Indians. Understandable, but yeah, that was a fun time. So I don't know what happened to those guys. They must have, I think they were moving on somewhere else, because that's the only memory I have of hanging out with those guys. I did buy some of that hash. I bought a block like that, and also some of that opium, and I smuggled it in my luggage for bringing back home for the friends. You know, I know, kind of crazy, but that's what I did. I hid it in some rolls of camera film. Not a lot, I mean, not a commercial, saleable quantity, but enough to get me in trouble. But I didn't get into trouble. But anyway, so wandering around, these other things that I really remember and liked in Calcutta was these slices of cucumber. They'd have them in icy water, and you'd go. It was like for a snack. And you'd order some, and they'd lay the thinly sliced cucumber on a tray for you, or on a plate, and they'd sprinkle chili powder and lemon juice with a bit of salt. Well, they were delicious. They were real Moorish. Got talking to a guy who, you know, and remembering my experience with a luncheon with those fake bank accountants, and got talking to another guy. So he says, "You want lunch?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm about to order lunch. So come and sit down with me." So yeah, so his story was, "Oh, would you like a home-cooked Indian meal? You know, my mum's a really good cook." And I said, "Yeah, that'd be fantastic." "I know," he says. "You Western, if you like a cold beer with the curry." I said, "Yes, correct." He said, "What if you give me a bit of money, and I'll get the beer and I'll put it in the fridge. It'll be nice and cold for you. And I'll come and collect you at your lodge tonight about 6, and we'll go up to Mum's place." So I gave him a bit of money, thinking, half thinking at the time, I'm never going to see this guy again. And lo and behold, I never saw him again. So, but that was pretty small. But there was another guy. So not long before I was there, they had been filming a movie called City of Joy, I think. Look at this Chloe. City. So this fella was walking beside me. Now remember, I had a lot of camera stuff. When I was keen on taking photos, I'll show you some of the photos I took that I got developed. Some of them were black and white. So a lot of those were taken on this day. So this guy starts walking beside me, and he asked me, you know, what I like doing and what I want to see, blah blah. He says he was working as an extra on this film City of Joy, which might be Patrick Swayze, but I could be wrong. So I said, "Yeah, look, I'd really like to go and see some slums, and you know, take some photos of the slums." And he said, "Oh yeah, I can help you with that." So we book a taxi. So he actually came good, this guy. So we get a taxi, and he took me out to this place where they were living on this, I call it water, but it was stagnant. It was like a creek that was stagnant, and the smell was incredible. The smell was disgusting, and they were living in corrugated iron shacks and, you know, huts, and, you know, you didn't get very long because they saw you. So he was telling them that I was from the United Nations, but I had 2 cameras on the, you know, on straps and taking photos, and then he was loading up one of my cameras while I'm busy taking photos with the other. I've taken a lot of photos and slides, and Chloe's moving the camera. Stop moving it. But yeah, it started to get dangerous. More and more of them started coming out of these huts, and yeah, the stench, the stagnant water, the mosquitoes, and the crowds, the ever burgeoning crowds that were pressing in to see what was going on. But I took some fantastic photos that day, some of them black and white, which I'm real proud of. So These are the photos I took on that day. Tried to take portraits. There's a woman starting up a fire. In the black and white photo, the little stud in her nose stands out. That is the creek where they were living on. That's their huts. And I'm sure there's bigger, more expansive slums than these. These are probably just the closest to where I met that fella that got the taxi. Some of them are colour. They look quite proud, actually, those women. Beautiful coloured sari. Or maybe that's a different place. Yeah, that's that creek. You can see all the rubbish that's floated out and it's just stagnant. Sort of raised huts, bark and paper on stilts. They're often burning things. Maybe burning oil or car parts. And that's a rickshaw with a man pulling it. I think Kolkata was the only place that still had men pulling rickshaws. And that's a scene where they're all washing. They look pretty happy. They've got their heads soaked up or soaked up. I don't know why I know him, but he looked like an alcoholic. He had a bottle of this homemade liquor, spirits. Probably send you blind. And those, I think, are just street shots. I don't think they were the slums because they're people's occupations. And there's another one. So some of them were colour. You can see the floating debris on the creek. Yeah, that's a colour photo. That's like housing they were in. And that's a scene from that's Calcutta, but they were typing. They're typists, so people were bringing letters to these guys for them to type to either send home or to, you know, maybe to apply for a job or something. Maybe you couldn't yourself, you weren't literate, perhaps. I guess that's all gone now. Yeah, that's the outskirts of the slums again, I think. An Indian holy man. Great for photography. Real sort of defiant look in her face. Almost challenging me, you know, what are you looking at? Fair question. On the way back, look, I'm sure there were bigger slums than that. That was just one that he knew, or, you know, he kind of knew what I wanted to see. On the way back, he started mentioning how his sister needing a kidney transplant or something, and, you know, he's hinting at more money. But I rewarded him for the time that he was with me, and he did what he said he could do, which was take me in and show me the slums and keep me safe while I was filming. Little cat's playing around on her back. She's chasing her tail. She's a mature cat, but she's a real kitten, Chloe. She loves to play. So that was my experience in Calcutta. I don't know how long I was there, maybe a week. And laying on that cot, bombed out on opium, having happy dreams. So at that stage, I had a decision to make. Well, there was no decision. I could have gone on to the Taj Mahal, but I had no interest, had zero interest in the Taj Mahal then. I've got zero interest in it now. But one place I wanted to see was Lucknow because of this siege, the siege of Lucknow. I showed you that book, you know, the 1857 Sepoy Rebellion in India. And the siege of Lucknow lasted from the 25th of May to the 27th of November 1857, and it was a sustained assault and eventual relief of the British Residency, the British governmental headquarters in India's northern city of Lucknow. which was part of the Indian Mutiny against British rule. The relief of Lucknow consisted of 2 attempts by the British to rescue Sir Henry Lawrence and a contingent of British and Indian troops, along with several hundred civilians, from the centre of Lucknow, where they held out under siege conditions for 6 months. With widespread mutinies underway, Commander Lawrence ordered all women and children of Lucknow to take cover in the Residency, the city's chief fortress, on the 25th of May, and Lawrence himself retreated there on June the 30th. The Residency was protected by battery positions but was vulnerable because a number of buildings surrounding it were occupied by rebel snipers and artillery. Despite this precarious position and the death of Lawrence early in the siege, the troops and the civilians managed to hold out thanks to the actions of a number of soldiers who were later awarded the Victoria Cross. The first relief attempt occurred on September the 25th when a force under the command of Major General Sir Henry Havelock fought its way across rebel-held territory to Lucknow. However, by the time he reached the Residency, Havelock had lost so many troops that he considered it too risky to attempt to evacuate the civilians. So the relief force joined the garrison, improved the defences and waited for a second relief. On November the 16th, a much larger force approached Lucknow, led by Lieutenant General Sir Colin Campbell. The force stormed the Secundra Bagh, a walled enclosure blocking Campbell's route to the Residency, but now the British soldiers had learned of the massacre at Cawnpore and no mercy was shown to the rebels. The British reached the Residency on November the 19th and began evacuations. By November the 27th, the residents had been removed and located to safe locations. Campbell would return in March and recapture Lucknow. The losses were British, 2,500 casualties of 8,000 troops, and unknown number of Indian rebels, maybe up to as 30,000, but they really don't know. We get the train to Lucknow because of the siege. Fascinating story. And it was the best day of my time in India, was the visit to the British residence in Lucknow. It's the only time I ever got a rickshaw. Got off the train station and this Indian fellow, running. Or maybe he had a bicycle. Maybe he ran, I can't remember. I reckon he had a bicycle. Like a rickshaw. Anyway, yeah, he cycled me around. He got a bit lost and I got a bit frustrated with him, but eventually he dropped me off these big walls where the British residence was. I've seen videos of it, the site, lately, and the Indian government have made it they've done it up a bit. They put a monument there and they've cleaned up the gardens and freshly mown lawns, the bits that I saw on the videos on YouTube of Lucknow. But when I was there, it was all overgrown and abandoned and derelict. But wow, it was fantastic, like some of the halls where the men and the children had stayed while they were waiting for the relief force to fight their way from Delhi across to relieve them. And were they surrounded by sepoys, Indians that wanted them dead, You could see the cannon fire, the holes in the walls. There was like a clock tower that was just riddled with bullets and cannon shells. When you got into these rooms, were very unsafe, climbing the stairs and all that, were very rickety, but they'd have on the wall, Lieutenant Palmer's daughter killed by a cannonball, 1857, and the date. There was another room that was a snooker room where men had been playing snooker when a cannonball came through the window of their snooker game. There was an old derelict graveyard with British soldiers and the women and children that died holding out. The relief force that came to rescue them were equally trapped, having got in, fighting their way into the British residence. They were then trapped as well, and it was another long wait till the relief force finally reached them. I'll show you some photos of Lucknow as well. That was my best day in India. So this is Lucknow. It's a description of what happened, the defence of the residency of Lucknow. That's a fantastic shot. That's the clock tower at the English residency, the British residency. Cannon, but you can see it pockmarked with all the cannon holes. Yeah, that was the best day I had, I reckon. That's the accommodation or the eating hall where the women and children sheltered, also pockmarked. All the buildings pockmarked. Yeah, this is the one I like. Susanna Palmer killed in this room by a cannonball on the 1st of July 1857 in her 19th year, right? So our neighbour was using a ride-on mower a couple of years ago and sent a rock flying through the window where our cat was living, Sam's room. We heard this shattering as this rock came through the window, so I actually got a plaque. I had the rock mounted. I had a plaque which is sort of worded the same. That's the entrance to the residence. Right. There's some of the graves, but you can see there it's really overgrown, and there were weeds and cracks coming up through the graveyard. It's all better maintained now, I think. Right, which was kind of what I did last year in South Africa, visiting battlefields and battle sites, because that's my interest and my hobby. But I didn't up until then realise that you could actually find these places and see them. I thought they're just overgrown and forgotten. So I wish I'd have done a bit more of that in India. But anyway, from Lucknow I made my way back to Delhi, and I think I sold some of the cameras to some students that I'd met. Yeah, Delhi was quite nice actually. There was the old city which had some forts, some interesting forts and that, and then you know, the new side of Delhi. But I flew from Delhi across to London to meet my friend Paul, that I used to work with at BP, and he'd been assigned a flat in London, and he put me up for a couple of weeks. And when I arrived, he said, "My God, you're so lean. You're so brown, tanned and lean." I was. I didn't have an ounce of fat on me, and I was brown as a berry, and really was in need of some R&R before flying down to Zimbabwe to see Dad. So I'm going to leave it there for this chapter. Next time I'll talk about my time with Dad in Zimbabwe, and as I said, that was the last time I ever saw Dad in Africa. I did see him when he came over to Australia once more after that. But alright, that's plenty of talking from me. I hope you're all well. Plenty of good stuff out there on YouTube to watch. I'm glad if you've watched my videos, you got something out of them, or at least smiled a little bit through them. It seems a lifetime ago, and in a way it was. 1990 is a bloody long time ago. I was a different person then than I am now. Yeah, getting home, my friends picked me up from the airport, and of course I said, "We've got to get round to Doug's place." And I cracked out the hash and the opium, and we spent the afternoon, me telling them stories of India. Bought a lot of jewellery and that for my sister and for my female friends. I think I spent up American dollars in Calcutta, knowing that you know, I wanted to bring presents home. Lots of jewellery. I got jewellery for myself as well, and clothes and all sorts of goodies. India's great for shopping. But anyway, yeah, I'll leave that for the moment. So I hope you're all well. Take care.